The Book of Pastoral Rule by St. Gregory the Great. Part 1, Chapter 3. Of the weight of government, and that all manner of adversity is to be despised, and prosperity feared. So much, then, have we briefly said to show how great is the weight of government, lest whosoever is unequal to sacred offices of government should dare to profane them, and through lust of preeminence undertake a leadership of perdition. For hence it is that James affectionately deters us, saying, "Be not made many masters, my brethren." Hence the mediator between God and man himself, he who, transcending the knowledge and understanding even of supernal spirits, reigns in heaven from eternity, on earth fled from receiving a kingdom. For it is written, "When Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force to make him a king, he departed again into the mountain, himself alone." For who could so blamelessly have had principality over men as he who would in fact have reigned over those who he had himself created? But because he had come in the flesh to this end, that he might not only redeem us by his passion, but also teach us by his conversation, offering himself as an example to his followers, he would not be made a king, but he went of his own accord to the gibbet of the cross. He fled from the offered glory of preeminence, but desired the pain of an ignominious death, so that his members might learn to fly from the favors of the world, to be afraid of no terrors, to love adversity for the truth's sake, and to shrink in fear from prosperity, because this often defiles the heart through vainglory, while that purges it through sorrow. In this the mind exalts itself, but in that, even though it had once exalted itself, it brings itself low. In this, man forgets himself, but in that, even perforce and against his will, he is recalled to memory of what he is. In this, even good things done aforetime often come to nothing, but in that, even faults of long standing are wiped away. For commonly, in the school of adversity, the heart is subdued under discipline, while on sudden attainment of supreme rule it is forthwith changed and becomes elated through familiarity with glory. Thus Saul, who had before fled in consideration of his unworthiness, no sooner had assumed government of the kingdom than he was puffed up. For desirous of being honored before the people, while unwilling to be publicly blamed, he cut off from himself even him who had anointed him to the kingdom. Thus David, who in the judgment of him who chose him was well pleasing to him in almost all his deeds, as soon as the weight of pressure was removed, broke out into a swelling sore, and, having been as a laxly running one in his appetite for the woman, became as a cruelly hard one in the slaughter of the man. And he who before had known pitifully how to spare the bad, learnt afterwards, without impediment of hesitation, to pant even for the death of the good. For indeed, previously he had been unwilling to smite his captured persecutor, and afterwards, with loss to his wearied army, he destroyed even his devoted soldier. And in truth, his crime would have snatched him farther away from the number of the elect, had not scourges called him back to pardon. Chapter 4. That for the most part the occupation of government dissipates the solidity of the mind. Often the care of government, when undertaken, distracts the heart in divers directions, and one is found unequal to dealing with particular things, while with confused mind divided among many. Whence a certain wise man providently dissuades, saying, "My son, meddle not with many matters." because, that is, the mind is by no means collected on the plan of any single work when parted among many. And when it is drawn abroad by unwonted care, it is emptied of the solidity of inward fear. It becomes anxious in the ordering of things that are without, and ignorant of itself alone, knows how to think of many things, while itself it knows not. For when it implicates itself more than is needful in things that are without, it is as though it were so occupied during a journey as to forget where it was going, so that being estranged from the business of self-examination, it does not even consider the losses it is suffering, or know how great they are. For neither did Hezekiah believe himself to be sinning when he showed to the strangers who came to him his storehouses of spices. But he fell under the anger of the judge to the condemnation of his future offspring, from what he supposed himself to be doing lawfully. Often, when means are abundant and many things can be done for subordinates to admire, the mind exalts itself in thought, and fully provokes to itself the anger of the judge, though not breaking out in overt acts of iniquity. For he who judges is within. That which is judged is within. When then in heart we transgress, what we are doing within ourselves is hidden from men, but yet in the eyes of the judge we sin. For neither did the king of Babylon then first stand guilty of elation, when he came to utter words of elation, inasmuch as even before, when he had given no utterance to the elation, he heard the sentence of reprobation from the prophet's mouth. For he had already wiped off the fault of the pride he had been guilty of, when he proclaimed to all the nations under him the omnipotent God whom he found himself to have offended. But after this, elevated by the success of his dominion, and rejoicing in having done great things, he first preferred himself to all in thought, and afterwards, still vainglorious, said, "Is this not the great Babylon, that I have built for the house of the kingdom, and in the might of my power, and for the honor of my majesty?" Which utterance of his, as we see, fell openly under the vengeance of the wrath which his hidden elation kindled. For the strict judge first sees invisibly what he afterwards reproves by publicly smiting it. Hence, him he turned even into an irrational animal, separated him from human society, changed his mind, and joined him to the beasts of the field, that in obviously strict and just judgment he who had esteemed himself great beyond men should lose even his being as a man. Now, in adducing these things we are not finding fault with dominion, but guarding the infirmity of the heart from coveting it, lest any that are imperfect should venture to snatch at supreme rule, or those who stumble on plain ground set foot on a precipice. End of chapter 4.